Have you heard of the term Juvenoia? It's the belief that the younger generation is doomed because of whatever new thing they're growing up with. In the 50s, it was rock and roll music. In the 60s, it was hippie culture. In the 80s, it was MTV. In the 90s, it was video games. And now, it's phones and social media. Everyone's terrified that screens are ruining kids socially, intellectually, emotionally. And honestly, I get it. My friends and I grew up in the 90s. We didn't have smartphones. So we played outside. We talked face to face. We connected with people. And we all grew up into completely normal, rational, emotionally stable human beings. People love to talk about the good old days, before phones, before social media, before screens ruined everything. But want to know why the past seems so great? Because you were young. You were energetic. You were optimistic. You didn't have to pay bills. You didn't have responsibilities. You didn't have adult problems. But that doesn't mean that the world itself was better. In fact, in many ways, the good old days were much, much worse. For instance, women, who I think we can all agree are much more intelligent, much more reasonable, and much more ambitious than men, were expected to be stay-at-home moms. Interracial marriage, same-sex marriage, were not only discouraged, they were illegal. I remember my grandfather talking about how when he was 16, he left home to go find work. I mean, when I was 16, I think I was just learning how to change my own diapers. On another personal note, my son is autistic, and for the last 2 years, he's been attending a school that specifically caters to children on the spectrum. And in a few months, he's going to be transitioning to public school with an individualized education plan specifically designed for him. So why do I bring this up? Because just a few decades ago, he would have been written off completely. I mean, why educate and nurture a child who's special needs and probably won't amount to anything? That was the old way of thinking. Speaking of kids, at my old school, there was a class labeled ED, emotionally disturbed. Now, imagine being a child and carrying that label around every day. Especially being that right down the hall, there's another class called gifted and talented. It's crazy to me. So yes, sometimes modern life can seem sad and confusing and overwhelming, but perspective matters. Today we say, life was so much simpler back then. But was it? Between 1914 and 1945, the world endured 2 world wars and the Great Depression. I once heard a historian describe the early 20th century by saying, "It was once said that a man could live from boyhood to old age and never know a time of peace." That doesn't sound very simple to me. Speaking of the past, for a long time I always thought that I was born in the wrong generation, the wrong era. And like, if I was born in the swinging 60s, for instance, I wouldn't have been so stressed and anxious all the time. But over time, I've come to realize that we are who we are. I would have been the exact same person with the exact same problems and insecurities, regardless of when I was born. Same with you. When I was younger, my siblings and I would always watch the Woodstock documentary. Oh, 500,000 carefree teenagers, listening to incredible music, celebrating peace, love, freedom. It all seems so magical. But those kids became adults too. And that generation would go on to have the highest divorce rate in American history. Because no generation escapes adulthood. And honestly, some of the meanest, cruelest people I've ever met in my life came from that supposed peaceful, enlightened era. A lot of them probably needed therapy, but back then, therapy was something that was completely taboo. Today, everyone seems to talk openly about mental health. I'm just one of many YouTube channels that discuss it. That's progress. So going back to the good old days that we all speak so fondly of, I look back on my childhood very fondly as well. But if I'm being honest, there were some painful moments. I used to get so incredibly upset when I wasn't invited to parties. I got bullied. I got rejected constantly. We all did. I'm sure you have your own memories of not making the basketball team or not getting the role in the school play, or maybe the boy or girl you had a crush on asked your best friend to the junior prom. I don't have that memory because I didn't go to my junior prom. I couldn't find a date. We just tend to edit those parts out when thinking back on the past. And despite all the doom and gloom about kids on their phones and their screens, I'm actually very optimistic about today's kids. Kids today are drinking less. Many don't drink at all. And yet sometimes they get referred to as the anxious generation. I mean, if I'm being honest, how anxious could they be if they're not drinking? But if they're avoiding alcohol, talking openly about mental health, trying to take care of themselves emotionally, then maybe they're doing a lot of things better than we did. Maybe we need to worry less about today's kids and start worrying about ourselves. How can we improve? How can we cut down on our own screen time? How can we learn from our mistakes? How can we overcome challenges, worry, and stress, and lead a happy and fulfilling life? Instead of looking back on the good old days, let's make these the good old days. Look, we can never go back to our childhood. We can never relive those days. But there is one way to hold on to the things that made childhood so special. The optimism, the curiosity, the ability to laugh at ourselves and not take life so seriously. It's probably the best advice that I could give on this channel. Never grow up. See you next time.